Well, welcome to this episode of Three Ps in a Podcast, really. Purpose, Pathways, and Perspectives. And I'm really pleased to have a very special guest on this episode, Deborah King. Now, Deborah and I have known each other for a long time, but she is founder and CEO of Final Touch. And I'll make sure her contact information is in the podcast notes. But welcome, Deborah.
I'm so glad to be here with you, Lenora. Yes, we've been friends for a long time, and it was such a joy to get your contact and have you reach out to me. I was really excited to reconnect.
Yes, me as well. And I know we live several states apart now. So the distance is there, but gosh, with technology, it's like we're almost in the same room, sort of.
Yes.
Well, the reason why we're talking is because I love talking about things that are helping people reach the potential that is in every person, which is more than most of us usually recognize how much potential we actually have. And I know you're very passionate about just human connection. So, first of all, tell us a little bit about you and how you got into founding your business.
Well, it's a question I'm asked frequently. I started Final Touch 32 years ago. It doesn't even seem possible. I don't know where all the years have gone. And one thing I've been asked again and again and again is, how did you start doing this?
Mm-hmm.
And it really goes back to me being a teenager. And I looked around and I thought everybody knew a secret and no one would tell me what it was. Everybody else knew how to dress, everybody else knew how to act or behave when they went different places. Everybody else knew what to say in conversations. And I always felt like I was one step behind or just missing a key piece of how to interact with other people. And it always made me feel awkward and out of step. Now, other people, Lenora, wouldn't have known that about me. I was a cheerleader in high school. I was in pageant. I was first runner up to Miss Federal Way. I mean, I was very engaged with people in social settings, but on the inside, I always was second guessing myself. And so I started pursuing education and I ended up saving up my babysitting money because I wasn't brought up in a family that had extra cash laying around where they could send me. I saved up my babysitting money so that I could go to modeling school. And I rode the bus to downtown Seattle and went to what used to be the Carolyn Hansen Fashion College, attended there. And that's where I learned a lot of the skills about appearance, about poise, about a little bit on etiquette, but a lot of the visual elements I learned there at Carolyn Hansen. I ran out of money, so I'm actually a modeling school dropout, claim to fame. And then I was a contestant in the Miss Seafair pageant and had the opportunity to participate in all of that. Was asked to teach at Barbizon Modeling School, which I did for some time in downtown Seattle, and had the opportunity to interact with a lot of people on different levels. But people started saying, would you share with us what you know? And so one day I'm working as a model for Roddles in Auburn, if you're familiar.
I remember.
Their modeling group. And one of my friends, one of the co-models, we were having lunch after doing a fashion show. And she said, well, why don't you just start your own school? And I said, okay, what do you think we should call it? Because I never thought about having a business plan or anything like most people do when they start a business. I just knew I needed a name. And so we sat there and she said, well, what do you need after you have everything else? And so we came up with Final Touch. You need the final touch.
I love that.
So after that, I found a dance studio and just started. It just started. And very first day, very first session, we had the news media there and just have been blessed with an amazing, amazing journey. I mean, I still at times just can't quite believe it. I've had the opportunity to travel to the Middle East twice, been to Japan and taught, went to this one place called Grand Cayman. That was rather tough, but I taught there several times and all across the United States with Fortune 500 companies to start up and lots of individuals. My heartbeat though really is helping women excel and exceed so that they don't do what I did and constantly wonder, am I doing the right thing?
Well, wow. That's even more than I ever knew about what you've already done with this journey and how many different places you've ended up. And I'm sure that's a piece of it. But I also would not have thought that of you when I met you. Of course, it was a few years later than when you first started this, but I can certainly relate to how insecure I was and always feeling like everybody else seems to know, and I certainly don't know. I was always guessing, always feeling insecure. By the time I knew what the fashion was, it was pretty much going out of fashion. So it wasn't my normal thing to be savvy on anything. So, thank you for saying that the way you did too. I mean, it's just what happened, but so many people do feel insecure, like somebody else knows that secret and you're just floundering and afraid to ask and thinking I'm supposed to know better, and we
Right.
don't.
No. We don't. And, people will say, well, Deborah, social skills, what you teach, I mean, this is common sense. Everybody should know this. And I always say, it's only common sense if you've been taught.
Yeah,
Social skills
yeah.
have to be taught just like every other skill set. And what you know was passed on to you most likely through your family or trial and error. I usually erred more than I won in that process, or it was by observation. You would observe two people sticking out their hand and go, oh, that must be how you do a handshake. Didn't
Mhm.
mean you did it correctly. It just means you functioned in the same manner. So these skills have to be taught, and we invest so much money in getting our academic training.
Mm.
We spend years and thousands of dollars to get a degree that we hang on the wall that we may or may not pursue at the end of it all.
Mhm.
But the one area that every one of us must invest in order to be successful, no matter what we choose to do, is developing our social skills.
Mm.
How do we interact with people in a way that is going to leave us when we walk out of the room with others saying, wow, I want to be remembered like that. That's somebody I want to get to know. That's somebody that I want to be close to or have a relationship with or work with. And it's the difference between having those social skills, truly.
Yeah, and, you and I talked a little bit when we were first talked about doing this podcast, and I asked a question that I think is still so relevant, and I loved what you said before. So, here we go again for the audience, is when you talk about this topic, in some ways you can see how nice and obvious it seems to be that you'd want to gain skills in this way because people that have good emotional intelligence or people skills tend to, in the long run, make more money anyways.
Mhm.
But it can sound like you're trying to learn how to just perform for others, or it's
Yeah.
it's putting on something shallow or a performance. And I know that's not what you're talking about. So what do you say when people say, "Well, aren't you just trying to tell people to be one certain way or is something shallow?" So how do
Mhm.
you address that?
Yeah, excellent, Lenora. And that is actually why I think there is such a push against what we call etiquette. Because what Final Touch focuses on is what I call the ABCs, our appearance. How do we show up visually so that we can connect with other people more effectively, or at least not be off putting? How do we use our behavior, etiquette, and that so that we can be more socially confident and be able to connect? And then how do we use conversational skills in order to enter into a group or carry on a conversation with an individual? So the ABCs. And
Mm,
when we look at the behavior or the etiquette piece of it, people often have that attitude that that's pretentious, that it's stuffy, that it's actually separates people. And in some ways it did. I mean, actually, etiquette back in the day, I mean, Emily Post wrote the first etiquette book in the 1920s,
oh, wow.
and she wanted to write about novels and things like that. Actually, she wanted to be an architect, but women weren't allowed to do that in the
Oh,
day.
wow.
And so she wanted to write novels, and that wasn't really what they were interested in. And so they asked her to write a book about what goes on in kind of the secret society. She did, and it was a bestseller right out of the gate because everybody wanted to know the secret, come to find out. And it still is available today. Of course, it's been updated many, many, many times. I know the Post family, and now their great great grandchildren are writing and carrying on. But etiquette was used to keep classes separated,
Wow.
that you had to know the secret code of the elite, of those
Mm,
behind the scenes. And so when she kind of opened the door to what that was, then people could start reading it and trying to learn about it. And of course, as years have gone on, there's trainers much like myself that teach on some of these things. But etiquette The way Final Touch looks at this, it's not about just the rules. I often say, I really don't care if you use the right fork. Well, I kind of
Yeah.
do. I mean, I teach you how to use the right fork, not so much because I want you to impress other people, but when I know the rules of the game, I feel much more comfortable and confident moving into any kind of a dining setting. If someone doesn't know the rules of the game, then they don't show up. If I'm uncertain that I know what fork to use or how to sit down at a multi-course meal, then I avoid the invitations. I don't even show up there. And then I miss out on important opportunities.
Or you might show up and just be stressed out. You're just uncomfortable and second guessing. And I've been there. I've been on stuff and thought, dang, I know by now I should know this. And it's simple stuff, just the simplest things of basic etiquette, at certain restaurants. And it wasn't a big deal other than feeling like, oh, you start with the outside fork or whatever, something so
Right.
simple actually. But I was actually stressed about something that in all reality, no one at the table cared about. They actually didn't, but I was stressed because I had no familiarity with that environment. Places where you're like, uh-oh, I feel like there's something different and I'm scared to make a mistake. And you don't need to
Yeah.
stress over silly things.
Yeah.
It's amazing the basic impact.
Yes, and that comfort builds our confidence, and then it
Mhm.
makes everybody else at the table feel more comfortable. And then we show up. Our real self shows up.
Yeah.
And that's what people really want to get to know, not some inauthentic, awkward version of me. They really want to get to know me. And there's been too many times the inauthentic, awkward Deborah showed up at the table and not the Deborah that I know that I am and my best self. And so when we learn these skills, it actually boosts our confidence, but it has to be balanced out with the most important issue. And so I learned the etiquette, I learned the rules of the game here, how what fork goes first and how to navigate that table. But even if I didn't know those things, if I'm not able to connect with the person across the table from me, I have missed the whole reason to sit down and break bread together.
Mm.
It is all about human connection. And that's really what sets Final Touch apart from many other organizations that might teach on etiquette. We're really not about wear this particular style of clothing because honestly, as long as you have clothes on and you're appropriate, that's number one. But I'm not so into fashion as I am into what's appropriate for the given setting. And I say, where are you going? Who are you meeting? What are your goals and objectives? And then how do you use your clothing, your behavior, and your conversational skills to ultimately connect with this other person? Because that's the power of gathering together. That's really the only reason I care about it. It builds my confidence and puts other people at ease.
Interesting. And I agree. It's like being able to be yourself is a lot easier when you're in a
Mhm.
quote comfort zone. So if you have some knowledge, you feel more comfortable and you're more likely to just show that personality, show what you know, what you can bring to the table in as far as maybe not the official food table, but what you bring to the environment, the relationship, the conversation. I was in India, very, very fortunate a couple years ago to go there. And you tell me if this is relevant or not, but I remember going out to dinner with some of the team there in actually Chennai. And we went to a restaurant and they were a little concerned would I want to eat the way they did? Because sometimes then it's more of finger foods. And I said, oh, yes, please. Please show me. I want to just be a part of what is normal for you. I love this. And for one, they really appreciated that
Yeah.
because they were trying to make sure that they were somehow providing what I needed. And I said, no, please, I just want to participate in your culture. And you might think, oh, someone eating with their fingers, oh, how dirty. No, it wasn't at all dirty. It was a very clean process. And it
Mhm.
was quite lovely and fun. And it was very fun to be comfortable enough with myself to say, let me enter this. You show me. And because of other experiences, I was more willing to just be able to do that and go there with something new. And I think that's a part of the process too. Once you gain confidence, that confidence follows you other places and can help you further connect with just
Mhm.
other people. Etiquette was the same in the sense of respect and care and enjoyment, but some of the how to's varied. And I wasn't so worried about it because I had gained confidence along the way overall. Does that fit what I
So
just
good.
said?
Because etiquette changes as society changes. And some of the things that influence etiquette is culture. So every culture has their own etiquette guidelines, I guess you could say. And understanding their rules for social engagement is important. So what you really demonstrated, Lenora, is I honor you. I honor you. I'm a guest in your home
Hmm.
and I want to honor you. And I really want to embrace and learn how you go about the process of enjoying this meal. That is that is a beautiful gift. So often we come in and Americans have had the reputation, I don't know if it's so much today, but I know in the past it certainly was, that the ugly American, because it was our way or no way, and we would
Mm.
show up and everybody wanted to cater to us. But there's something so beautiful, and I don't have a problem at all. I've been doing this for a long time. I do not know absolutely every etiquette rule globally and
Sure.
specifically geographically in that area. And so I'm happy to ask. I am like a little kid in a candy store when I get to learn something new, because it's a way to create connection.
Hmm.
That's what you were doing.
I want to hear about your experience a little bit, just an example in Japan, because we had some exchange students some years ago. And
Mhm.
again, it was wonderful learning about their culture, like 16-year-old gals, three different times that stayed in our home for 3 to 6 months while they were going to school and we were their host home. And I loved learning about their culture and they were learning about ours. And it's so precious. You find out, oh my gosh, the respect for people.
Mm,
I remember the first one, my kids were quite a bit younger than her at the time. They were the same age later on when we did it, but in this
mm,
case, younger. And I thought, man, she shows such respect for these little kids.
mm,
And they have such respect culturally for older people as well. And she'd say, "You often say," or "What means this?" And then eventually later she was improving her language as well. But it was a delight as we honored each other and learned about each other's ways. So you want to share an example of how you ended up going to Japan?
Yes. So when I was in Japan, I was invited there to teach for a full week. And it was actually more of a youth program that I was in Japan for. And I was there for 7 days and we were there in Kobe, did all sorts of things with this group. I mean, it was really hands on out in the field. And it was a delightful, beautiful experience. But I think one of my most favorite parts of that trip was the host family that invited me over had gone to school in California, and so they were very familiar with Western etiquette and culture and so forth. And so on the last day there, she said, Deborah, would you like to come in and see our home? And, in Japan, they typically have very small spaces and they don't tend to entertain in their homes. They go to other places. And the opportunity to go to her home was so precious to me. When my children were young, like you, we had Japanese exchange students stay in our home for 3, 4 years, different times. And it was curious to me way back in the day, because my kids were real little at that time. I didn't understand some of the things that were happening like I did as the years went along. But when I was there, she brought me in and she showed me everything from the moment you enter the door to how they bathe, to how their kitchen operates, to how they conduct just family life. And I mean, how their closets are organized. It was one of my favorite gifts, frankly, of having been there. And it was a point of connection, but that wouldn't have happened if I came in and I was just, I'm the etiquette person, and here we are, and we're going to go through all the etiquette rules. She knew we had relationship that had been built because connection had been developed. And so when we focus on connection, when we focus on respect, when we focus on cultivating trust between people, then connection's a natural byproduct of that.
Mhm.
And that's the kind of the other side of that teeter totter. One side's the rules that doesn't really care about who the human is. The
Mm.
other side is all about this connection issue. And I always say we look through this lens where we see other people, and I say all people are made with worth and value. Even that
Mhm.
sandpaper prickly person. Have you ever had one of those in your life?
Oh, no,
I've
never.
had a couple.
Yeah, me
I've
too.
probably been at one for many
Yeah,
people
yeah.
too, I must say.
Yeah, I have to. Especially seasons, she's like, "Oh, that was rough. Okay, I gotta go fix that." Yeah.
That sandpaper prickly person, but that person is made with worth and value. And they're made, I would say, in the likeness and image of God. They're uniquely and beautifully created They may not be acting that out at the moment, but that's really who they are. And then do I realize every action of mine, everything I choose to wear, everything I choose to do, everything I choose to say somehow impacts that other person. And that is going to be my reputation. That is going to be how I'm going to be remembered, which is kind of a tagline here at Final Touch. When I walk out of the room, when I shut down the Zoom meeting, when I, end that phone call or whatever it may be.
I love that. It's very, very true. You are building your reputation all the time, every
Yeah.
interaction you're doing. And again, there is such a complete difference between thinking I'm doing this to perform and manipulate versus I care about you. I want to enjoy you. I like being a human myself and I like interacting with other people. It's it's very impactful. In fact, I accidentally found out, you should know this, I suppose, but when you have good relationships with people you work with, work flows so much better because
Mm.
when you have a need, people will go, "Oh, absolutely, I'll help you out." And I sometimes was surprised at the favor that I had. And
Mhm.
I went, "Lenora, it's because they know you like them. You genuinely like them. You try to do a good job whenever you work with them. It's like having oil in your engine because you actually can move the parts and they aren't having friction." So it pays off in a lot of different ways. And I love that you said it's ultimately about human connection because you do etiquette, but you also do communication and social skills, which you touched on. So you want to say a little bit more about that? And then I want to talk about how your daughter got involved.
Okay. All right. Well, conversational skills. I mean, we cover everything from meetings and greetings. The connection hormone is known as oxytocin, and it is going to be demonstrated through a handshake.
Hmm,
Physical touch releases oxytocin. An introduction, anything that creates connection
hmm.
is going to release oxytocin. And it doesn't only bond relationships, it makes me feel better. It makes the other person feel better. And that's a natural bond between two people. So, how do we engage with others? And we have this little technique we use called launch, linger, leave when you're in a conversation with somebody, which, sometimes we have a hard time starting that conversation. Other people feel like, okay, I don't know what to say now that I said hello. And
Yes.
then other people are saying, how do I get out of this? I've done such a good job. They don't want to leave. They're like Velcro to me. And we try to ditch and dodge, but we have some practical strategies we provide for how to end that conversation in a more meaningful way, more respectful way. So conversational skills. And then we do get into, especially because you mentioned my daughter, Melissa, we get into things like how to handle difficult conversations and what do you do when things don't necessarily go the way you wanted them to go, which happens to all of us, purposely or not. How do we navigate with social media?
Mm,
What about technology? How do you deal with that when you're communicating with people, which is the primary way we're connecting, especially since 2020?
right.
So those are some of the areas that we touch on.
Wow. And so you mentioned your daughter, Melissa, and I loved her background and how she got involved with you because I know the listeners will be interested in hearing it. How did she get involved? And what did she used to do?
She actually was in my very first class that Final Touch ever did. So we were at the dance studio, and she was, I don't know, she might have been 4 or 5 years old. Actually, my granddaughter's age now. And she was there with some of her little friends, and it was called Young Ladies. I had a couple of starting classes, but that was one of them. And the newspaper showed up that day, but she is a born leader. That girl came out of the womb leading, and she always has amazing ideas and great structure. I mean, innately she did this. So she was in the class and she goes, I'm going to help my mom. And so she started, I think she was coloring pictures or something to give to everybody. And I'm like trying to teach the class. But she just went out of her way to lead. And so interesting how the years went along, and she ended up being in speech and debate. She was a top speech and debate participant at Federal Way High School, and then in college she went to UPS. She went on to law school at USC, and then she worked for Cravath in New York for a summer associate, and then she went to LA and ended up working with Gibson Dunn for several years and had amazing experiences in all of that. always
Mhm.
at the top of her game, always excelled. And, much of her ability to excel was because of the social skills that she had. Not that she always appreciated them probably when she was a teenager, learning this mom doing what I do,
Yeah.
but she excelled again and again and again. I won't tell her story because that's hers to tell, but she had so many opportunities that came her way that didn't come to other people, much like you touched on, Lenora. When you have this social lubricator and you're depositing continually into your social capital bank account,
Mhm.
when you're in a place of need, be it small or large, you have the opportunity then to go and withdraw that.
Mhm.
And you're able then to get things completed or achieve things that you never could have done alone. We weren't created to live alone or to
Mm-mm.
do it alone. We need each other. Anyway, she decided one day she wanted to step out of law and she wanted to walk alongside with me, and she came in with Final Touch, and I think we were both kind of surprised. I really hadn't ever had that in my script. I mean, I was thrilled that she was, but it wasn't really something that I had thought my whole life. Well, my daughter will grow up and eventually work with me.
Yeah.
But it has been amazing. She's a first class trainer and she's an amazing woman. And not to mention, she's an amazing mother to my two beautiful granddaughters.
That's something I'm sure you're very, very proud of. And to see how she saw the ripple effects, the benefits. People don't realize how valuable all of these things are if they're authentic. And like you said, it goes back to the original foundation is recognizing your own value and valuing connection with others.
That's one thing I say to all of our clients, and especially to our women clients. We have programs. I have a women's weekend I do in Seattle and in St. Augustine, Florida, right on the beach. It's so beautiful. And those are coming up in the fall. We're going to re-enter those again this year. We took a year off, obviously,
Mhm.
but they're small groups and we spend 3 days together. And we really hone in on the importance and the value of social skills and answering those questions that I had as a teenager that I hear again and again and again,
Mm.
Lenora. Women have these questions. Men do too, but women, we vocalize things so differently. But how do I do this? I don't want these unsettled questions in the back of my mind. I want them answered. And I may have waited until I was 30 or 40 or 60, but I don't want to spend another day wondering.
Mm.
And so we come together and it's so powerful. One of the first things I say to them is you have to know who you are, because etiquette is not about letting people take advantage of you. It's not about just being nice
Mhm.
and letting people run over you. You first have to know, who are you? I had to find out, who is Deborah, and sort of where is my lane, and then how do I run in that lane successfully. I don't have competition because there's only one me, and when
Mm.
I'm showing up and being the best me, I'm going to use the tools that I have available to me and how to dress or how to behave or how to carry on conversations so that I can show up and be that best me. I don't let people run over me because I have those healthy boundaries, knowing who I am.
Wow. Would you be able to share one or two practical tips that somebody could walk away with today? And then we'll make sure people know how to connect with you, whether they're an individual or a business, to take one of your classes. And I think you have some online stuff as well, don't you?
Yeah. Yeah. We call them live online programs. They're not recorded. We may do a couple recorded things that people can jump in and watch, but the goal of social skills is to be in a social environment. And so we have set up our online programs to be as close to an in-person live class as you can possibly be in. And so we require everybody to show up with cameras on and ready, just like you would be if you were sitting across the table from each other. We have several options for those. We also have live in-person programs. We actually have a week-long program coming up for young women between 18 and 29 here in
Wow.
Texas. And it's a 7-day camp that is amazing. It's amazing. But as far as tips, I think one of the most powerful things we can do is practice the art of acknowledgement. In fact, in our newsletter this month, it's free. If you don't get our newsletter, I recommend you go sign up for it at finaltouchschool.com. And we actually have the download of what I'm going to share right now free for you to be able to have access to. But the art of acknowledgement is so simple. and yet so seldom done.
Hmm.
And it's 3 simple steps. It's first, make eye contact. So when you walk into a room, put away your mobile device, put away other distractions mentally or physically, and look up. Pick your head up, look around the room, make eye contact with as many people as you possibly can. The second step is smile. And a smile is not, it's not just mouth movement. I mean, that's
Yeah.
just not a smile. A smile actually is with the eyes, and the
Hmm.
mouth just sort of follows along. And often I say, if people have had Botox, you don't get those lines. In fact, a lot of times the eye doesn't move much. So I've worked really hard to get these lines, but smile, and you want to smile with the eyes. Even with a mask on, you can tell if someone is smiling. So if you're in
Hmm.
an area that is still masking, do you know that you can still smile? And then even more so is that eye contact, because you don't see the mouth. You're very limited to basically the eyes.
Hmm.
So eye contact, smile, and then the third step is nod or just say hello. So I might walk past you in a room, I'm coming in, I smile and I nod. And what it does, Lenora, is it says, I see you. I see you. In a world where people feel invisible, in a world where people feel like no one notices they're there, in a
Hmm.
world where loneliness is at an all-time high rate right now, the person that walks in and just says, I see you. That is so powerful. And it is a point of connection, whether it's brief and passing or it's long and lasting. That little 3-step process that is not hard. Anybody can do it. It's just being aware and being purposeful in when you set out to go connect with others. You can do that in your coffee shop when you go to pick up coffee. You can do it through the grocery store. Even if you are ordering your groceries online and they're putting them in your trunk, make eye contact with the person that brought your groceries out. I mean, there's so many practical ways to use that 3-step process, and people are starved for human connection.
Oh, I absolutely love that. You're right. It can be used everywhere. And, even on the phone, you can tell if someone is smiling. When I used to do voiceover work, you always smiled, especially when you said the name of the client or the customer, because you can hear it in the voice and see it, like you said, in the eyes. I love that. It's a much more impactful than we think. And that's a good reminder for me because we can get busy. And I heard long ago somebody said, stop ignoring people you don't think matter to you.
Good.
And you don't even mean to. A lot of times we don't mean to.
Yeah.
But it's so easy to make someone's day, like, just by acknowledging them. Wow, thank you. I love that. So how can, again, people get contact with you and get your
Mhm.
newsletter and check in on either hiring you from their business or taking one of your courses as an individual?
Well, I would sign up for the newsletter just because we put out free tips every month. So this month was the art of acknowledgement with a
Mm.
free download. But there's often class discounts listed in there and other things that our clients really appreciate. Our website, finaltouchschool.com, is a great resource for people. And you can find out about our live in-person classes or our live online courses. We also do private coaching. So some of our clients just want some one-on-one tune-up in a particular area, and we can do that via Zoom or phone call or in person, depending on a person's comfort level. We also do corporate training. I had the opportunity to do training for the Boeing company for about 8 years prior to COVID. So I've done a lot of corporate training, and those are all customized. A great amount of our work that we do is customized. So I meet with my client, determine what their goals are, what their needs are, and then create a program that's going to be suitable for their particular team.
Is there a final thing you want to say that I didn't touch on that you'd want to share as we wrap up the podcast?
Just, I want to encourage people, especially after this last year and what we've all walked through. Social isolation is so damaging to our health, mentally and physically and socially. And I encourage people to look for ways to find connection. I know we've had a lot of opportunities to disconnect, a lot of opportunities to create division, a lot of opportunities to divide and conquer. But how can you go out today, tomorrow, next week, and create connection with the people that you pass by, the people in your realm, in your sphere of influence? We do life with those we know, we like, and we trust. And all of us have an opportunity to go out and create a better world. And it starts with me.
Thank you so much. Thank you for this time. It's been wonderful to reconnect.
Yeah.
And I hope people follow up on this because you've certainly provided a great reminder for me to acknowledge those around me.
Thank you, Lenora. It was really fun to be with you.
Thank you. You as well. And thank you all for listening. And the notes and links will be in the podcast note page. And pass this on to someone else too. We hope you subscribe to the podcast, leave us comments, and have a great week. We look forward to talking with you, our audience, every week. So thanks for taking time and listening to 3 Ps in a Pod.